There are thousands of machinists in Pakistan, and half of them seem to be here. This large Pakistani workshop independently developed a mechanized, automated brick-making machine to mass-produce bricks. Although their equipment is simple, they excel at applying principles of physics and mechanics. They don't use blueprints. All the necessary data is imprinted in the minds of the master craftsman. The master starts by working on the iron plate for the brick wheel. After accurately measuring the required data with a caliper, they use a homemade gauge to draw a circle in the center of the plate, first outlining the outer circle, then the inner one. With the circles in place, they cut along the marked lines using an oxyacetylene torch. Since the cut area is used to assemble the bearing housing, the master proceeds cautiously to ensure smooth assembly. After cutting, they begin making the bearing housing. Using an old housing as a template, they add a ring, carefully centering it before welding it in place. They transfer the welded bearing housing to a lathe for precision cutting, both inside and out, to allow the bearing to fit perfectly. Despite the age of the lathe, the master's skilled work restores the bearing housing to its original metallic sheet. Next, they assemble it onto a steel plate. Since the inner circle was pre-cut, the master must only align the housing with the circle and carefully weld it in place. The brick will consist of 2 steel plates of identical size, and bolt holes are needed to assemble the brick mold later. To ensure uniform bolt hole positioning, the master welds the 2 steel plates together before transferring them to the drill press. Before drilling, a template is spot welded onto the top plate to prevent misalignment. The drilling is completed according to the marked template, and the welds are ground off to separate the 2 plates. Once ready, the bearings are assembled. The master applies some lubricant, gently tapping the bearing into place with a hammer. For the axle, they repurposed a used axle tube and welded circular iron plates on both ends to create a bare axle. However, the rusted surface must be turned down on the lathe before it can be assembled. With the lathe spinning rapidly, the axle is returned to its original metallic sheet. The master frequently measures it with calipers to ensure it meets the required dimensions. After applying some lubricant, the axle is fitted into the wheel hub using a large hammer to secure it. This task is time-consuming and labor-intensive, but after a full day of hard work, the basic outline of the brick will start to take shape. Next is the brick mold. The master uses a hydraulic press to bend U-shaped steel sheets to the desired shape. Once all the sheets are bent, they are placed into a custom mold, 2 at a time, forming a rectangular brick shape. The sheets are then bolted together and welded for reinforcement. During welding, the master makes fine adjustments to ensure the molds meet precise specifications. After assembly, they are still not ready for installation. The master pairs them on a template for final welding and alignment. Once all the molds are welded, they are transferred to the drill press for bolt holes to be drilled at both ends. The molds are then mounted onto the brick wheel and bolted tightly. To enable mass production, the brick molds are spaced just 3 centimeters apart, and an iron plate is welded between them to prevent debris from entering the machine. The next task is making the drive gear. The master retrieves a pre-made steel gear plate and uses oxyacetylene to cut it in half, forming 2 perfect gear halves. These halves are carefully aligned and welded to the outer rim of the brick wheel. The master uses a self-made positioning tool to ensure accurate alignment of the gear ring. After assembling the gears, the internal roller is fitted. Its role is to press down on the internal pushrod when the wheel rotates, which pushes the brick out of the mold onto the ground. Finally, the push plate, part of the brick mold, is created. Each mold requires a push plate with a smooth surface to contact the brick. The master turns the surface on the lathe, grinds the edges, and drills the necessary bolt holes for the pushrod to fit into. After assembling the push plate onto the brick wheel, the master tests it, making adjustments until the brick mold and push plate are perfectly aligned. After 2.5 days of meticulous work, the brick wheel is completed and installed onto the brick-making machine. When the machine is started, rows of perfectly formed bricks are produced quickly. Efficiency has increased significantly, and the quality remains consistent. Kudos to the skilled and hardworking craftsmen of Pakistan